my only goal is to become good at Japanese, and I didn't care about jobs, I didn't care about school, I didn't care about anything. But you can actually learn a language for $0 in your house in your home country. Learning Japanese is really challenging and it takes a lot of effort, and it's hard to continue studying for years every day just because you want to watch anime. That's like kind of not a strong enough motivation. In order to really learn like Japanese, you almost have to treat it like a job, at least to the level that, like a high level, you really have to treat it almost like a job. Like DJ, for example, he graduated from an online university. He doesn't have any projects, no internship experience, and he just graduated from an online university, which is not prestigious. And in the US, he would probably never be able to find a job with that kind of resume. But he got picked up, like, first company he interviewed for in Japan, just like that, he actually got a job.
Hello everyone, and today's video is a little different than usual. But I'm doing an interview with someone who calls himself an AJATTer.
AJATTer.
And AJATTer. And this is Nico. Nico, can you introduce yourself? Who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, so my name is Nico / SevenStop is my online name, and I have been learning Japanese for almost 5 years. And I started when I was 16 during coronavirus, and I'm also, I live in the US, and I go to university, go to college for CS computer science in Arizona. I've lived in a lot of different places in the US, but I currently live in Arizona and go to ASU. And I'm interested in getting a career in tech, obviously, because I'm learning computer science, and that's how I found out about Tyrone's channel.
How did we meet each other? A guy from America, ultra weeb, studying Japanese, and a tech worker in Japan. How did we connect?
Well, I was interested in getting a job in tech. I'm studying CS, and one of my best friends, who used to be in real life, now he moved to Japan, so he's no longer in real life, but one of my best friends is DJ, a member of Tyrone's Discord server, and he must have posted Tyrone's videos somewhere. I saw your videos, and I started watching some of them. I thought it was interesting. I joined the Discord, and then I got invited to the private channel with a bunch of devs in Japan, and that's basically how we met. Just because I spoke Japanese, I guess he added me. You added me to the channel, and yeah.
Whenever there's someone in the pleb dev Discord who looks like they're serious about it, I kind of let them in. Because if not, you're going to have guys just like, okay, I watched anime for 1 year. I want to work in Japan. It's like, no, this is not the place for you. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so can you explain to us, okay, before I go on to this part, I want you guys, I have a link to his video of his YouTube channel. He's speaking Japanese, walking through Shinjuku. And when I watched this, and I thought, what is this? Why does this guy sound so good at Japanese, even though he doesn't live in Japan?
じゃあ次は、日本人の友達が作れない。あるいはなぜ日本人の友達が作れないのかっていう。結構この問題を抱えてる人は多いと思うんだけど簡単な話で、基本的に2つの要因がある。
And I reached out to try and get you to talk to us about this. So, what is this AJATTer? What is this all about? And why have I only heard about this like a few months ago?
Yeah, so AJAT is a type of immersion learning method. So there's this method for learning languages called immersion learning, and then there's a bunch of different methodologies of that, and they're always making new ones. Sometimes you got to rebrand to make a little, like, make some dimes off, make a nickel off of it, sell some stuff. So they make a bunch of new ones every once in a while, but it's basically all the same idea, immersion learning. The fundamental idea is that you acquire languages through input. So AJAT is all Japanese all the time is what it stands for. That's one of those methods. It's basically the most hardcore type of immersion learning, and it's based on this really old blog of the same name, All Japanese All the Time, by this eccentric guy named Katsumoto. And this was a long time ago. This is like 2006 or something. He claimed that he learned Japanese, and back then it was completely different. Like they didn't have the kind of resources they have today. But he claimed he learned Japanese in America, which at the time was pretty unheard of. to fluency, and then he got a job in Japan. And he wrote on his blog about how he did it using this input hypothesis, which I'll talk about. Basically, people that imitated his method are called AJATTers.
So you're an AJATTer.
Yeah, I consider myself an AJATTer. Well, maybe not anymore because I don't really do it all the time anymore. But when I was in my, when I was in, I don't know how to say. I want to say a Japanese word, Zenseiki.
Say Japanese.
Like Zenseiki. It's like the peak. When I was at the peak, I was like, I was really doing it like all day, every day. Japanese study.
I want to ask this: is an AJATTer always a weeb, or can you find an
No.
AJATTer who doesn't like anime? Like, oh, I hate anime, but I like Japanese language. I want to read like some old Japanese book. You know, what kind of AJATTers do you meet?
There's actually a ton of different AJATTers. Now, I'd say the biggest group of people who are learning is people who like anime, but the demographics are really interesting because there's a lot of people who like anime, and obviously most of the people who like anime, who are studying Japanese, are people who like anime. I think we kind of have that idea, and it's mostly true. And most of the immersion learners are also learning because of anime. But the people who are really serious about it and take it all the way, they aren't learning just because of anime. Because if all you want to do is watch anime without subtitles, it's learning Japanese is really challenging, and it takes a lot of effort, and it's hard to continue studying for years every day just because you want to watch anime. That's like kind of not a strong enough motivation. So there are many people that start because they like anime and are kind of weeby, but throughout the process their motivation changes. That was how it was for me. And there's also a lot of people who like other Japanese material. There's some people who like visual novels. I don't know if you know what that is, but there's a lot of people who like it's like a kind of like a picture book video game. Like what's
Okay.
Doki Doki Literature Club? Do you know what that is? That
No
was
idea.
no.
I'm not a weeb at all.
You're not you're not a weeb? Okay.
I'm guessing that there are like gamers who want to play Final Fantasy VII only in Japanese.
There's a lot of people like that, or there's unreleased games or something, and that's why they started studying. I know a guy who that was the reason he started studying Japanese. There was a game he wanted to play, it hadn't been localized, and he wanted to play it in Japanese. And there's people who like maybe they even like Japanese dramas, or they just think Japan's cool, or like maybe there's some other like there's a girl involved or something. Like that's a common story, but there's a lot of motivations, but I'd say most people they start because they like some kind of weeb sort of content. They may be manga or visual novels or light novels or something like that. But usually, if they are like studying for many years, their motivations change throughout time. And the people who are like continuously doing it for a really long time just because they like anime, they usually are kind of like neats, or they like they spend a lot of time on the internet.
I get a lot of these guys in the Plev DevIppo. When I started the server, I had all types of people, but I did realize there were kind of neat like people, and they also were quite eccentric with their opinions on things. Like it's quite like I don't know if you probably have a lot of Hikikomori in America who love anime culture, and so I did see a lot of these people, but I don't think many of them did not do the like immersion studying. It was more of their little side hobby.
In order to really learn like Japanese, you almost have to treat it like a job. At least to the level that like a high level, you really have to treat it almost like a job. Like I think there are a lot of neat sort of people, or like people who are just really into anime and they do that all the time. But we have a really high percentage of hikikomori neat types in the immersion learning community. Especially, there's like a certain 4chan community that has a bunch of people who are really hardcore learning Japanese through immersion, and they really like books, like Japanese books. And a lot of the people in there are kind of neat maxed, as we might say.
Your initial interest in Japanese would have to be anime then, or anime.
Yeah,
Which one was the one they go, okay, man, I've got to do this.
I didn't really get into anime until middle school, but when I got into high school, I saw this one anime. I was kind of like watching anime on and off, and there was a girl involved, and I would watch anime, but I wasn't originally very interested in it. But then I watched it on and off with friends or something, and when I watched this one anime in like 2019, late 2019, called Erased. I don't know if you know what it is. Boku dake ga inai machi is what it's called, but maybe some of the viewers will know. But I watched this anime, and that's when I started really getting into anime. I was like, wait, holy crap, this is really good. And that's when I kind of technically started studying Japanese, but it was like a hobby level. Like I was doing Duolingo occasionally, and like I pirated a textbook and read it. I wasn't really seriously studying Japanese, but I did start studying Japanese technically when I saw that anime, and then after that I started watching a ton of anime.
My first one was, you probably know. You can probably guess what a millennial's first anime was. Can you guess that?
Evangelion? I don't
Oh
know.
no, I'm not that
Naruto?
old. That's like Gen X. Yeah, it's
Gen X?
Naruto. It's before Naruto. So I mean, everyone knows Dragon Ball. That's like but it's
Oh,
not
yeah,
really
Dragon Ball.
considered. It's not really considered like one of the animes that will get you into Japanese, right? Because it was all in English. We watched Goku
I
speak
mean,
English.
there.
Naruto was probably one of the first ones, and Hajime no Ippo for me. Those two.
Oh, yeah. That's a famous one. So
Yeah.
there's a. I actually haven't seen Hajime no Ippo, but I did see I haven't seen Dragon Ball either, but I've seen Naruto. Those really popular anime are mostly just dubbed in English, so I think people
Yeah.
who watch them didn't even think of them as being Japanese for the most part.
No.
Except maybe occasionally, but like for the most part, the anime that people are really like, most of the people who are learning Japanese are really into anime, and they're usually into like seasonal anime or newer anime that are not, they don't have English versions.
That was the thing back in university. This was 2008, a long time ago. I would watch most likely pirated. I didn't pirate it, but most likely pirated Naruto series, and it was all in Japanese, and there was just English subtitles. But that was like, I found gold. I was like, oh guys, I found it. You got to watch this. But
Yeah.
now I get, and back then it wasn't a cool thing. I mean, not saying it's cool to be a weeb, but now you see like famous people saying like anime things. I think the point I'm trying to get to is now it seems really mainstream compared to like 10, 15 years ago, right? Is that what you're seeing
Yeah,
around you? Every guy and his
absolutely.
dog.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even when I was like, even when I was younger, anime was something you got bullied for watching. But nowadays, everyone watches anime in the U.S. Like, even what we might describe as normies, just random people I
Yeah.
meet at my college, they are really like, they have at least seen a couple anime. There's a handful of really popular anime that almost every young person has seen. Now, older people probably still think it's weird, but nowadays it is kind of cool. It's kind of mainstream to be a weeb, but and that has resulted in this huge influx. Ever since coronavirus, it became super popular, and we have this huge influx of people who want to learn Japanese. They think Japan is heaven on earth. They want to move to Japan. So it's the weeb, the weeb uprising has begun.
So can we talk about that part now? So I think you've been to Japan quite a few times now. Like, how often have you been to Japan, and what was your experience then?
Yeah, so I've been to Japan twice, and I was already fluent in Japanese when I went. So, which is probably a pretty unusual concept to most people, because most people think you have to go to a country to become fluent. But I'm going to talk about how it works. But basically, you don't really need to do that. But was already fluent. I went to Japan, and it was a lot of fun. I always had a lot of fun when I was in Japan. I've been there a month at a time, both last year and the year before. And I went with a bunch of people from the internet and then met up with all kind of people there. So it was a lot of fun.
And that was through without. Okay, I'm trying to think. If you didn't have language immersion, what would be different? How would you view Japan? Would it change your experience?
Yeah, it would absolutely change my experience. I mean, I think that if you don't, Japan or any country on earth is completely different if you speak the language or not. And a large portion of people's problems with Japan or any country involves their inability to speak the language. And so, for me, my experience was very different because I didn't come in with a tourist mindset. I was more like, I want to meet all of my friends because I had spent years talking to people online. Like, I was kind of like terminally online, and I had a lot of Japanese friends online. And I wanted to meet Japanese people in real life. Like, I mean, I had kind of already met some people in real life, but like just be able to go out and to actually talk to people in real life in Japanese was something I was really looking forward to. And because I already spoke Japanese, I was able to meet all my friends and do a lot of things that maybe I wouldn't have the opportunity to do otherwise if I didn't speak Japanese. Like, for example, I climbed Mount Fuji. Me and my friends stayed at a place. All my friends spoke Japanese. So I had a group of people I met on Discord who all spoke Japanese and we went together. But they all were also all immersion learners. We climbed Mount Fuji. We stayed at this share house and we had the owner drive us to Mount Fuji. And when we were on Mount Fuji, and everything was in Japanese, when we were on Mount Fuji, we met a streamer, a famous streamer in Japan. And because I had Japanese friends, they actually were watching his stream and they saw me on his stream. And then they messaged me when on the mountain. And they said like, oh, I just saw you on the stream. And then I realized this streamer, he'd went ahead of me. So I caught up to the streamer and started talking to him in Japanese. And then he sat down and me and my friends all sat down and we were on his stream talking in Japanese for like 30 minutes. And we ended up, the climb was a little bit slower than expected because my friend was literally sick while climbing Mount Fuji, which isn't a good combination. And a lot of people climb in 2 days, but we were like, oh, we're young, we'll just climb in 1 day. What's the problem? So we tried to climb it in 1 day, but the way it works is you have to get a bus to go to Mount Fuji or a taxi. You can't just drive up and like get dropped off and picked up there. So when we got down, it was already really late and the taxis and buses had stopped. And so we were like, wait, are we screwed? But then we discovered a man living in a cottage on the mountain and he had the door unlocked. So we went in his house and we woke him up and then negotiated to let us stay there the night.
In Japanese or English?
Yeah, in Japanese. That wouldn't have happened if we didn't speak Japanese.
So, but I think the feeling you must if you do immersion in your country, and the first time coming to Japan, you must feel like this is Mecca for you, and you're just like, once you have that one conversation, you're like, oh, great, I made it. Like I can speak to locals. I kind of do it with taxi drivers when I go to like cities traveling. You talk to a taxi driver, he will tell you a lot of interesting things about what's happening locally, and even though I've been here for a while, I go, yeah, like I feel validated. Like, okay, great, I can speak enough to talk to a taxi driver.
Yeah, that absolutely happened. I even had an experience where I talked to a taxi driver, and he was a bit eccentric, and he kind of had some opinions about the New World takeover, and it was like, I think he was like into the kind of conspiracy theories that people in the West believe. I don't know how he found out about that stuff, but he was telling me all about it, and it was a funny experience. For me, I was never a touristy kind of guy like, oh, there's the building, oh, there's a mountain, oh, that's cool. To me, it was more about like, I wanted to have interesting interactions and meet cool people. And I could do that because I spoke Japanese.
So then now you have 2026, you'll get your degree. I want to talk now about, is this path something that younger guys are watching around you going, okay, great, I'm going to study computer science. I'm not going to get like a Japanese degree because it's probably, you're better off getting a CS degree. In my opinion, getting a CS degree and doing immersion in your spare time and your holidays. So is this a, what do you call it, a strat that people are seeing? Okay, Japanese and CS.
Honestly, that is not a strat that I'm seeing because Japanese is very difficult and CS is also difficult and most people can't do those things at the same time. And the most common thing I see is that people they learn CS and then they get out of school and they realize that they can't get a job and they're like, oh shit, I have to learn Japanese now. Or maybe they watched anime and they were like, oh, maybe I could get a job in Japan or something. And there's the other way around too. There's people who it's much less common. It's kind of like people who are into the immersion stuff. They already learned Japanese and then they're studying CS. There's always a lot of people who want to move to Japan, but there's not a lot of people who speak Japanese. If you don't speak Japanese, Japan, the job market isn't really much different from the West.
Did you go into a CS degree before? Were you into Japanese before you started university, or did you get into university before?
So I started Japanese when I was 16. So I was actually already fluent when I started school, or when I started college. So I actually took a gap year because I didn't know what to do when I graduated high school, but I worked because I had some interest in computers and stuff like that. So I had when I was in high school, I got this certification in computer hardware, and then I got a job doing computer repair kind of stuff, and I did that for a year, and then that was during that year was when I first went to Japan, and then I came back, and I was already fully fluent at that point, and I was like, okay, I was actually influenced by my friend DJ that to start learning CS after that.
So, because he has a degree, he's working now in a Japanese tech company. He's probably got really good Japanese as well. And I'm trying to think, you didn't plan this out, right? I mean, this is just what I'm saying is that, because I always say this on my channel, is that if you have a degree and you speak half decent Japanese, you don't have to be that great. There are so many opportunities here.
Yeah.
But I guess, when did you see these opportunities
Yeah.
arise?
See,
Like,
actually,
you're still young.
I didn't even intend to work in Japan. Like Japanese, I mean, I haven't actually got into my Japanese journey yet. That's something we got to talk about. But basically, when I started learning Japanese, I was like, I didn't have anything else I wanted to do. I was like, my only goal is to become good at Japanese, and I didn't care about jobs. I didn't care about school. I didn't care about anything. I literally was like, I'm going to become the best foreign speaker of Japanese in the world. That was my goal. And that was a very naive goal. I didn't realize how good people were at Japanese. But when I started, I was literally like, I'm going to sacrifice my entire life and do whatever it takes to be the best person on this planet that speaks Japanese. Then I already learned Japanese, but I didn't know what to do with my life. And that's when I did the gap year, and I met a bunch of people. And to be honest, I was kind of a loser when I was younger. I was like the weeb nerd in the corner, and I didn't have any skills, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. After I learned Japanese, that really gave me a lot of opportunities that I wouldn't have otherwise to meet people and become a more mature adult. And that's when I started thinking about what I wanted to do. And I met a lot of people who were doing computer work, computer science, software engineering, and that's when I decided that I would be interested in becoming a CS major. But even when I was studying CS, I didn't actually, I never thought about working in Japan until honestly, really recently, like a year ago, is when I first started considering working in Japan. And then I didn't even know that the job market was better in Japan until quite recently. But I just was like, oh, I'm gonna get a job in Japan because my whole life, at the time and now too, my girlfriend's in Japan. Most of my friends are in Japan, and I have a lot of friends here. I actually have a Japanese bubble in the U.S., which I'll talk about. So all of my friends basically are Japanese or speak Japanese, and they all leave. They all either move to Japan or they go home because they are Japanese. So what kind of results in me becoming lonely, missing all of my friends and my social life, which kind of gets recycled every semester with a new batch of Japanese exchange students. It just made logical sense for me to move to Japan because my whole social life's in Japan, and there's a lot more opportunity for there. And I'm not cracked. I'm a pleb, and I'm not super high IQ or anything. I can do a job, I can do things. Especially, I'm really good with pattern-based learning, practical learning. But I'm not really academic. I'm not a high IQ kind of guy. So it just made more sense for me to go down this route.
I make all these jokes about pleb devs and stuff, but I think in America, right, you have a CS degree. You're going to graduate 2026. Let's say you didn't have Japanese. You'd have to go into the local market of Arizona, I'm guessing, initially. Versus having so many, you're not going to get paid a crazy amount in Japan, but you're going to have a decent lifestyle, right? So do you think about this? Have you been thinking about this recently where, look, it's going to be really rough maybe in America to get your first tech job. Now, in Japan, once you graduate, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to say easy for you, but I know so many companies that would say yes to you. So
Yeah,
is this the path you're going on? That once you graduate, you're just gonna apply like crazy, and just once you finish like your last day of university, try and get to Japan. Is that the plan?
I'm gonna see what opportunities arise. If I could get a job in the U.S., I might take it because and save up money and then move to Japan in the future. But um, I think I think it would definitely be a lot easier for me to get a job in Japan, and I'm very social. I know a lot of people in Japan. Even with my connections, I'm pretty confident I could get a job like relatively easily. I'm fluent in Japanese. I'll have a degree, and I'm not retarded. I'm not dumb. I know like I can do the job. I also have internship experience, so I'm pretty confident that I could get a job. But if I could get something in the U.S., I would take it probably. But I'm not holding out my hope. So, but when I start searching for a job, I'm going to focus on Japan, but I will probably also look at some American companies as well. I'm probably going to start my job search this year.
Do you know of students around you, like the guys a year ahead of you? Are they having difficulty finding their first job in America, or is it?
I haven't met anyone who found a job, to be honest. Like,
Already?
I don't know a single person who's a new grad and was able to find a job with any ease. Like, I know people that maybe found a job and got laid off in a couple months. Like I have a lot of older friends as well who have already graduated and stuff like that, and who are in the industry. And I don't think I know a single person who graduated and got a job like without waiting like usually at least 6 months of searching or to 6 months to a year to get their first job, or they work at McDonald's while they look for a job or something. Like I don't think I know anyone who got a job right out of school. But the people I do know that are employed are in Japan. Like DJ, for example, he graduated from an online university, and I don't know if you know WGU. That's the university he graduated from, and he doesn't have any projects, no internship experience, and he just graduated from an online university, which is not prestigious. And in the U.S., he would probably never be able to find a job with that kind of resume. But he got picked up, like first company he interviewed for in Japan, just like that. He actually got a job, and because he speaks Japanese and he's not dumb, he can do a job. He's just not like he's not high status, you know, Ivy League or anything like that. He's just a normal person. But he was able to get a job.
But that's what most people are. We just want to get our foot through the door, right? And
Yeah.
just get a tech job. And look, let's be honest. And I say on my channel, like half of the stuff, let's be honest, most people can do like half of these tech jobs. It's not like you're building a rocket by yourself or anything, right? It's just half of it's like centering a div, fiddling with a DB. Like it's
Yeah. Yeah,
most
I
people.
actually agree. I had an internship in America, which I got that through a connection. Like obviously, I didn't get that through applying to jobs because you can't get jobs that way in the U.S. But I got an internship, and I was actually shocked at because that was my first year. I'd only completed 1 year of college, and I was actually shocked at how I could just learn it all. Like it's actually like, it wasn't that complicated. I was doing data engineering, and they started off like, oh, create an ETL, look it up, and if you can use the internet, you know how to look things up, you know how to read code, you can pretty much do like anyone can do this stuff. Like really, you just have to have a decent head on your shoulders.
And you also have to remember, like you're considered a Zoomer, right? Are you Zoomer generation?
I'm a Zoomer.
Zoomers are way better at tech than millennials. My opinion. You guys lived it. We kind of got in and got a job, right? But we didn't go through all the BS, and we don't have a computer in front of our face like 24/7. But you
Yeah.
guys are on it non-stop, so it's kind of in your nature to be better at these. That's my opinion. Better at these things, and of course, Gen X being pretty bad and Boomers just having no idea. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I
it is
agree.
it is a facade. Most of these tech companies, to be honest, being really good at whatever soy
Yeah.
stack you have to be good at to get a job these days. But
I mean, you want to be skilled, you want to know how to do stuff, and it's good to have. The most important thing is experience, but I think the problem is that, like, really, a lot of these jobs, anyone could learn it as long as they are experienced with computers, they know how technology works. A lot of people could do it, but there's just so many people applying that they need a way to weed out all of the people. And so that's when we get all the leak code and the IQ tests and that kind of stuff. Like that, you don't actually need to know that. It's just because they have so many people, they are like, okay, we can just choose the cream of the crop. We get pick and choose.
Does it feel good to know that if things don't work out in the US, Japan's always there? You can come here and just live a decent life, you know? How does that feel compared to what you're seeing around you? I'm glazing Japan right now.
Yeah, let's glaze Japan more. Yeah, it's actually very comforting to know that I'll probably never be out of a job since I speak Japanese. Like, I see a lot of people around me are freaking out about, like, actually one of my classes, because the Zoomer generation, when you go to college, they actually have official Discords for their classes, believe it or not. So I joined the Discord for my class, and the first message in the Discord was like, all this to put fries in a bag. It was data structures and algorithms. And like they were like, oh, we're so cooked, all this to put fries in a bag, no job. Like all of the chat was just doomer. And I was like, I'm so glad I learned Japanese because I can never relate to this. Like I'm confident that someone will hire me when I get out of school.
Yeah, but I mean, you really worked hard at it. So I think it's not just, okay, I read a book. I read like Mina no Nihongo kind of whatever book. But I think you really put your effort into it, which is why it seems that the AJAT is working.
Yeah, so to get back to it, I want to, this is the most important part of the interview. I want to talk about how you guys can learn Japanese. How did I learn Japanese? How can you guys learn Japanese? I mentioned it before, but AJAT is about learning through immersion, through input. And it's based on this theory of linguistics called the input hypothesis by Stephen Krashen, which basically says that in order to acquire a language, all people acquire language the same way, because acquiring a language is a fundamental function of the human brain. As a baby, basically you sit there all day and you listen to your parents talk, you listen to the TV, maybe your parents put an iPad in front of you and you listen to YouTube. That's probably what the kids nowadays are learning their first language from. You acquire your native language by being in an environment where you're constantly in contact with the language. You're constantly receiving input. So input is anything that where the language is entering your brain. So that could be reading, that could be listening, basically reading or listening. This is the only way it gets in your brain. Input hypothesis says that we acquire languages through comprehensible input, by understanding messages of comprehensible input. So for example, as a baby or an adult, it actually works the same way. As a baby, maybe your accent, if your accent will be perfect if you learn when you're a baby, that's the one thing that's different. But if you're an adult, you might have an accent. Even if you get good at the language, you'll probably still have at least a slight accent. But the fundamental process of acquiring the language is the same. So when you see a message, like if you see, like, if I'm like babu babu, like you might think like this might be called, you will probably assume this is called babu babu. I point to it, oh, babu babu. This is what we call comprehensible input. So there's a word, babu babu, and then there's some kind of message or some visual or something that makes it comprehensible. So learning a language is just this, but on a grand scale. So we just learned babu babu, and that's what this means. This ruler is called babu babu, and then now if we hear like babu babu blah blah blah, then we're like, okay, we know babu babu, but what does blah 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 mean? And then if we look at the context, like, oh, say he's measuring something with the ruler, maybe we'll be like, oh, blah 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 that means measuring. So that plays out on a grand scale, and that's how people learn languages. It's a little bit by bit, and as a baby, you have no choice but to guess, oh, blah 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 means measuring. But as an adult, we have the advantage, the wonderful advantage. So as a baby, for a child to become competent in their native language, it's going to take them like 10 years or more to really become competent. But you as an adult, you have the advantage of having a fully developed brain, or at least I hope you do. But so you can use your brain to learn languages faster. But if you use your brain too much, then it's actually the opposite effect. So like if all you're doing is you're going to classes, you're reading a textbook, you're understanding how, like, the structures in a theoretical model, but you don't have the intuition necessary to output it naturally, so you sound like trash when you try to speak. But the reason we input is because we want to naturally acquire the patterns by mass inputting and slowly understanding messages. And you look up words as you go along, you look up grammar to make it easier, because it would take forever to learn a language if you just sat there all day watching it, never looking up stuff, never reading a textbook, and you'd just be like blah 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 blah, and it would take a long time to know what any of that means. But because we have tools, we can use target language subtitles, we can look words up and look up grammar. We can use that to make the process faster. So what this looked like for me, I got into AJAT, which, as I mentioned before, it was based on this blog, and there's this YouTuber, Matt vs. Japan, who I actually know personally now. But Matt's channel, he talked about the immersion method, and he kind of explained that in a way that regular people could understand, how to use this input hypothesis to learn a language. And he was basically like, you like anime, here's how you learn Japanese with anime. So what I did was, every day I would wake up, and the first thing I was put in an earbud and start listening to Japanese. And there's two different kinds of immersion. So immersion is the process of inputting the language. That's what we call immersion. And there's two types of immersion, active and passive. So active is when you're sitting there and you're trying to understand something. You're trying to understand messages. So you're watching an anime, and it's a lot easier if you use Japanese subtitles. That's what I would recommend. You put on some Japanese subtitles, you watch the anime, and you try to understand what the heck they're saying. You look up words as it's going along, and that's the fundamental process of immersion. That's the most important, is actively sitting down, trying to comprehend the language, looking things up, and slowly but surely decoding the language. Eventually, at first you have to think about like what it means, use your brain to think about, this grammar, this word order, blah, 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 blah. But eventually that's all becomes unconscious. Language is fully 100% unconscious. And in order to unconsciously acquire a language, you just have to input a lot. You have to immerse a lot. It takes a lot of effort. I did 4 hours of active immersion every day for 3 years. And I also passively immerse, so that's listening while you're doing some other activity. Maybe I'm in class and I don't want to pay attention. Maybe I'm driving, I'm cooking food, I'm cleaning the house. I basically had an earbud in my ear 24/7. Well, I even did it while I slept for a little bit, but I didn't do it that much. But I basically listened to Japanese all the time for 3 years. And that's how I learned Japanese. And now that's a huge commitment. That's AJAT. That's the most extreme method of immersion learning. You don't have to do it that hardcore, and you can still learn the language. But if you want to get really good, you have to invest the time, and that's what I did.
Do you think 2 years is enough to be at, let's say, above your average conversation? 2 years of, let's say, 4 hours a day. Like how does someone use this?
If you did 2 hours of, so the metric that I usually give is you'll be fully fluent if you do at least 3 hours of active immersion for 3 years. But if you did 4 hours of active immersion for 2 years, and you use, so back in my day, I didn't even know, like nowadays they have all these tools and you can learn way more efficiently. But I was literally sitting there watching raw anime in Japanese, and you can imagine how challenging that is. Now I was watching at least 4 hours a day, every day. So some days I would literally sit there all day watching anime or YouTube. I watched a lot of YouTube. It's important to use a variety of sources so you don't sound like you're autistic when you speak Japanese. But I used anime, YouTube, dramas, and I read manga, and I read books and all kind of stuff. But the metric I would say is three hours a day. The minimum commitment, if you really want to get fluent in the language, I would say you're going to have to commit at least 2 hours a day. But if you did 4 hours a day for 2 years, you would at least be conversationally fluent. Now, you would definitely be conversationally fluent in understanding, but if all you did was watch stuff and you never tried to speak the language, you'd probably be really bad at speaking. Now, you might, because you can fluently understand the language, you can try and output the language even if you've never spoke before, but it would be very challenging. So if you say you have 2 years and you want to spend 4 hours a day, I would I would probably spend a year just trying to learn how to understand the language and then start speaking, because this is actually this might be an unfamiliar concept to a lot of people, because most people think you learn a language by speaking or by moving to the country, which the only way to acquire a language is through input, comprehensible input. And there's many ways of acquiring comprehensible input, because this is the way our brains acquire language. So many people acquire comprehensible input by moving to a country, talking to people. Maybe they go to a language school. Language schools are usually all in Japanese. And so that's a way of acquiring input. But you can actually learn a language for $0 in your house, in your home country. If you really have the time and you want to, you can do it. It takes a lot of hard work. You have to be consistent and do it every day, but you can.
I think you speak Chinese as well, is it?
No, no, I actually don't speak Chinese. I was learning Chinese for like 2 months, but then I quit because I wanted to focus on school. But this method can be used to learn any language, of course, and the amount of time it takes to learn the language is dependent on how close the language is to your native language. So the reason I say it takes 3 years to become really fluent in Japanese is because Japanese is an incredibly challenging language that's very different from English. But if you're learning Spanish, I know people that became fluent in Spanish in 1 year using this method. You can actually become fully fluent in like a Romance language, for example, in a year using this method. It's just that Japanese is an extremely challenging language, and that's why it takes so long.
That's why I made a joke. Someone wrote in Discord. Someone put some French, and I was like, okay, I know this word. I can figure out what this word means. You know, all the words like technique is basically the same technique in French. But I was like, okay. Then I said, why don't we just learn? I could have been trilingual by now if I just stuck with Romance language or European languages. But I guess that's Japanese or any East Asian language.
Yeah, Chinese is also brutally difficult as well.
The grammar's easier. That's what I found. The grammar's easier, but the pronunciation and the tone is like out of this world for a Westerner. Like,
yeah, for sure. I think that one of the main things that makes Japanese so challenging is because the grammar is really hard if you're a native English speaker. But the one of the best parts about immersion is that grammar actually isn't really a big concern through immersion. It's hard to explain if you haven't learned it this way, but I'm sure because you live in Japan, you speak Japanese, you have the experience of consciously studying a language and then eventually acquiring it naturally. So now you don't have to convert it to English in your head. You don't have to think about, oh, the grammar is made in this way, so it means this. But basically the way that you build that unconscious understanding is by mass inputting the language. So that's what immersion learning does. So when you learn through immersion learning, you'll definitely want to look up the grammar. This is how things work. These are the structures in the language. But grammar stops becoming such a big issue because you just are inputting and you understand what you can. If you can't understand, you let it go. And this is something that's very hard for people. I'll talk about it. But basically, you acquire the grammar unconsciously without needing to use your brain. And so it becomes a lot less taxing. So this is something that a lot of people struggle with in immersion, is that it's kind of hard to imagine how listening to like five hours of ching chong a day is going to actually make you speak the language, because it's a bunch of nonsense to you at the beginning. So it seems like it's impossible. How could this ever become meaning in my brain? But you look stuff up and you slowly but surely chip away at it, and you have to be able to tolerate the fact that you don't understand what's going on. You're watching some anime and you probably won't understand anything for like a long time, and that's okay. You just look up a word here, and then whenever you notice a sentence we call it I+1. And this is the fundamental concept of comprehensible input, which I talked about before, is that I is something you understand and 1 is something you don't. So you look for a sentence that has everything, you understand everything, but there's one thing you don't understand. If you only understood that one thing, you could figure out what the sentence meant. And so you start easy. You start at the low-hanging fruit, like a one-word sentence. Here's a word, and it's only one word, so I can look up the word, and then I can learn it. And I'm going to talk about how to learn words as well. There's a much more efficient way to learn vocab that people don't know about. But you just slowly chip away at each I plus one sentence. So you learned one word here, one word here, one word here, and then there's a sentence with 3 words, and 2 of them you know, and there's 1 word you don't. So you look up the one you don't, you learn that, and now you know 3 words, and you know a whole sentence. You understand a whole sentence, and just bit by bit, you add to your vocab over time, and you add to understanding over time. And by listening to the language a lot, you'll get better at listening. You'll be able to. It will stop sounding like a bunch of nonsense, and you'll start hearing, oh, a word starts here, a word stops here. Now this takes a lot of time, but you have to be really tolerant of the fact that you're probably going to spend at least 6 months not really being able to follow what's happening.
Even with foreigners in Japan, many, especially in the IT area, they can't speak Japanese. They've been some people have been in 9 years with N5.
Yeah.
I know an American guy in the chat. He's been in Tokyo for like I think 9 years, and I think he can't really speak. And I think I don't think he wants to. Not that he's like aggressively saying I don't want to, but there's just a barrier where it just goes. There's no point. There's like it's just a massive wall to conquer.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not saying I'm not excusing him for being an absolute pleb in Japan, but there's levels of how hard do you want to, do you really want this? And then there's a level like, no, fuck that. It's a bit too much for me.
If you're going to do something like AJAT, you really have to want it, because it takes a lot of hard work. I mean, it's not easy. Now, the fundamental process is actually very simple. You don't even need to use your brain very much. You just have to spend a lot of time decoding messages and listening to the language and reading the language, and you will eventually do it. If you get enough input, you will learn the language. But these people who are in Japan for a really long time, they don't know the language. It's because it's not like they don't want to learn Japanese, but it's not an important goal to them because they don't need to. If you were in Japan and every day you talk to Japanese people and you watch Japanese TV, you would learn Japanese even if you didn't want to. But they're like, if you're in Japan for a really long time and you still don't know Japanese, it's simply because you're not getting input in the language. They probably listen to English content on their own. Maybe they date someone who speaks English. They marry someone who speaks English. Their job might mostly be in English. Maybe the only time they use Japanese, they don't have local friends. They have a foreigner group of friends who all live in Japan, expat bubble.
Get out of that. Get out of that expat bubble ASAP if you want to do AJAT. Sorry, guys. See ya.
One of the things that's really interesting is I actually have the opposite. I have a Japanese bubble in the US. I have created a Japanese bubble while being in the US, which probably not many people have ever done that. I've slowly worked my way into the Japanese community. I'm fortunate enough to live in a city where there are quite a few Japanese people, and I've befriended most of the Japanese people in this city. So there's a Japanese church that I discovered. It's very small, but I go to that sometimes. I host a Japanese meetup group for language exchange, and at my school I volunteer at a language school for people from other countries, and there's a lot of Japanese people there. And then there's Japanese student associations at my school, so I go to all of those. I'm a member of all of the Japanese related clubs, and I've slowly networked my way into basically every Japanese circle in my school and my city. So I've succeeded. I've succeeded in Weeb Maxxing.
Friend Maxxing.
Well, yeah.
That's awesome. Is there some final message to all the weebs out there that really want to get into this?
Well, I think most of your audience is people who want to work in Japan, right? And probably a lot of people are people who they've lost hope in the Western job market. And I think that Japan seems like a really good way to get out of that, but you have this massive burden hanging over your head of learning Japanese, which to people who don't know about immersion learning or haven't learned a second language, it just seems like an insurmountable task. Like even when I was doing that super hardcore immersion, I had times where it felt like I could never learn the language, and I can't imagine what that feels like to someone who is taking classes and textbook and doesn't know about this kind of stuff. But you can actually, or they think maybe it's going to cost a lot of money, or they have to go to Japan or something like that. And we have, these people that live in a hut with N5, and they don't have the money to do that kind of stuff. So I want to tell you that you can actually learn Japanese without spending a single dime. It's actually fully possible. I don't think I spent any money to learn Japanese. I never bought, and you can spend money to improve your learning process. Like maybe you buy a tutor to so you can practice speaking sometimes. You can literally do everything for free on your own in your home country without ever leaving your room. And here I'm just to talk about briefly there's some tools that I recommend you look into. Recently, there's this thing called Migaku. I think there's a tool called Language Reactor. These are immersion tools that will help you. Basically, they give you target language subtitles, on-the-fly lookups. You can save words, make Anki cards. So Anki is another important tool. In order to learn a language, you have to learn a lot of vocab. Vocab is one of the most difficult things because natives literally know like 20,000 words. And they're like, how can I possibly learn 20,000 words? You don't have to be a native, but basically this program Anki, it uses spaced repetition, which is an efficient way. There's spaced repetition algorithms. They're based on studies of human memory. So when you see a new piece of information, you usually forget it really quickly, right? Like 10 minutes. But if you saw that information again in 10 minutes, then you would remember it for 30 minutes. And then you might remember it for an hour or two if you saw it again in 30 minutes. So there's an optimal interval to learn information, which is called spaced repetition. So Anki is a flashcard program that's based on spaced repetition. So what I did to learn vocab, because I probably know at least 15,000 words in Japanese, every day I added 10 cards. So when I was immersing, you immerse, and there's a word that's I+1, there's a sentence that's I+1. You take the word that you don't know, you put it into Anki, put the sentence into Anki, put the word into Anki, and then you memorize the word that you don't know. And then next time the word comes up, you might recognize it. Oh, I had that word in Anki, I remember it. And Anki will show you the information in an optimal interval, so it will make it a lot easier to learn a large amount of vocab. And I just did 10 cards a day, 10 words every day during my immersion. I would find 10 words, and there's a lot of words, so you're probably going to be able to find 10 words a day. And I would make Anki cards. And some people do a lot more, 15 or 20, but basically every day you review your Anki cards, and you don't review every card every day. That's why traditional flashcards are so inefficient, because you don't actually have to review all of them every day, because there's an optimal retention interval, which is what Anki is based on. So that's the third tool is Anki. Another tool is, we're going to have Migaku, Language Reactor are two tools, and there's a lot of Chrome extensions you can use to get target language subtitles. That's going to be really valuable, because when you're listening, if you're doing raw listening only, it's really hard because it all sounds like gibbly-gook. But if you have target language subtitles, then there's this site, Kitsuneko. That's a site that has target language subtitles for Japanese anime. And if you use Netflix, you can get subtitles. I recommend using subtitles at the beginning, as it'll make it a little bit easier. And that's all. I just wanted to get all the information out there.
I got to start putting myself. I got to become a AJATTer maybe.
Yeah.
So I got to level up. I work in Japanese companies, but the output's not there. But anyway, yeah. Thanks for educating us all on this. It was great to hear.
Thank you for having me.
And I'll see you around on the Discord, and maybe someday I'll see you in a meetup or something in Tokyo.
Yeah, actually, I'm coming to Japan soon. I'm going to Japan. So maybe I'll see you soon.
Oh, cool, yeah. I'll make a meetup or something, and we'll have a good time. And when we meet, we only speak Japanese, full immersion. No English. Sure. You're gonna absolutely make me feel like a N5 hut man.
No, there's still.
But anyway,
stuff
thanks for. Yeah, man. Well, you're probably learning forever, right? So thanks for joining, and thanks for everyone who watched this, and have a good one.
All right, thank you.